Thanks for joining us today on This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. So today we're taking a deep dive into one of the most ambitious redevelopment projects in Northeast Florida, a project poised to reshape nearly 30 acres downtown Jacksonville. GatewayJax is the company doing this. The center of this is CEO Bryan Moll. I appreciate you coming back. We were just talking about, hey, I think this is the third time you've been on our podcast here. And as we talk about GatewayJax, future of downtown, what it all means for economic growth in our region, really appreciate your insights. So let's talk here. Some of your background. My research says you've overseen more than $6 billion in real estate redevelopment projects across Tampa, Washington, D.C., other major markets. So how's that large-scale experience influence what's happening here in Jacksonville right now? A pretty exciting time for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's experience, I mean, I would like to say when I started my career that I never, 22 years ago, that I never made a mistake, but,
That seems unlikely, right?
Well,
you learn from those things.
You learn from things. And yeah, so $6 billion was actually before we got started here in Jacksonville. And so, through that period of time, we have seen now a lot of those projects have been built, and some of them have been operating now for 10 plus years. And so you can see how those projects have matured, what types of retailers have done well in those markets, what haven't, and so we learn from them. The type of project that we're doing in downtown is, believe it or not that dissimilar from all the other projects that I've worked on, whether it be in Arlington, Virginia, or downtown DC or Tampa. And so there are lessons learned from each one of those projects that we've been able to bring to Jacksonville.
Tell me about some of the similarities or differences and what people would recognize, because, yeah, I live in Northeast Florida, but I've been to Tampa. What would I see in Tampa that has your fingerprints on it? And what are the kind of things that are happening there that you say, yeah, we want to see that in downtown Jacksonville?
Yeah, I see a tremendous amount of similarity between Tampa and Jacksonville, sort of metro-wide, and then drilling down into downtown, a lot of similarities. I think the timelines are a little bit different. I think if you were to take Tampa, or let's say Jacksonville, where it is today, and back it up 10 years, I think that's about where Tampa was about 10 years ago from a downtown development perspective. But if you back up and you look at some macroeconomic and demographic comparisons between Tampa and Jacksonville, it has all the makings of success for downtown Jacksonville. And some examples are some very interesting ones. Median incomes are actually higher in Jacksonville than they are in Tampa. Average age is mid 30s. The incomes are the education levels are very similar. High employment growth. All the things that you would want in a strong metro area existed in Tampa, or exist in Tampa, and they exist in Jacksonville. What we saw 10 years ago in Tampa was the opportunity to create a center of gravity in downtown Tampa, where none had existed for literally decades. There were bits and pieces of multifamily buildings that had started to get built in downtown Tampa. There was a great development that the city did on the Riverwalk. You're starting to see that now here in Jacksonville, right, with a lot of Riverfront Plaza getting built and a lot of parks getting built. And but there had not been a single investor and developer and owner that had come together and said, you know what, we're going to actually do a lot all at once so that we can bring the amenities like a grocery store to market. And those things take scale, because the cost of building a grocery store is surprisingly very expensive. Grocery stores, they're a relatively low margin business, and therefore they don't pay a lot of rent. And so therefore, in order for a landlord to be able to build a grocery store, you need scale. And so I think that if someone went to Tampa today and they went to the project that we built, which is Water Street, and they had been there before Water Street, you would see where Jacksonville is today, had you been to Tampa 10 years ago, and you'll see where Jacksonville is going to be in a matter of a few years once we and others are done in downtown.
So Bryan, take a chance to just explain to people exactly where in downtown and where you're at in this project, because we talked, gosh, year and a half ago, really one of our first episodes on the podcast here was about, hey, what could be coming? And since then, we saw, even the last time you were here, we talked about, hey, in 2025, we're going to have a couple of groundbreaks. We're going to be doing some things. Where is the project? Where is it at now, and what's to come?
Yeah. So I mean, for those that may haven't, we were talking about some of our citizens in Duval County may not have been downtown for a while. So just to kind of to give everyone an idea of what we consider to be downtown, or what the DIA, Downtown Investment Authority, considers to be downtown, it's really over by the Jaguars Stadium. And if you move to the west, you hit sort of the core of downtown, or where the high rises are, Central Business District. And then if you continue to go to the west, you eventually end up over in La Villa and Brooklyn, which is the furthest side to downtown to the west. And then that's the North Bank, and there's the South Bank. So we are mainly focused in the Central Business District, or the core of downtown. So where all the high rises are, where City Hall is, where the old landing used to be, which is now Riverfront Plaza. We have just within about a 5-minute walking radius from Riverfront Plaza, maybe 7 minutes. We have, as you mentioned, we've got about 32 acres now of land that we own or control across 25 different city blocks. A lot of that is located in our first phase, which is the neighborhood called Pearl Square, just to the north of City Hall. But we also have some property that we own just to the west of Laura Street and just to the east of Laura Street. On the western side would be near the new UF campus. And then we recently worked a deal out with the city to acquire a couple of riverfront sites. That was part of a land swap that we did with the city.
So all of those things, is the plan happening as projected when we initially talked about it? Have there been delays or hiccups or redirections, anything like that?
Yeah, as there always are. There are surprises along the way. It can be something as small as finding a utility under the ground which wasn't marked or no one knew was there, and having to deal with that. Which in the grand scheme of things, they may seem kind of big, when you find it and you've got a timeline to hit. But there are those types of issues, and I wouldn't even call this an issue. I think it's going to end up being very beneficial. I think 2 years ago when we first sat down, we were talking about 5 city blocks, and we were calling it the Pearl Street District at the time. And that has now grown to 9 city blocks, and we're calling it Pearl Square. And what we added is a full-service Publix grocery store and a 110-key hotel, which we're about ready to announce. So that has changed, but it's been for the better. And we have been all along, very interested in growing our pipeline, but also we're being picky about what we do, because we want to make sure that our first phase is done right. We don't want to be so focused on the
positive impression on that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Build some momentum there.
Yep.
So you just talked about the grocery store. So how does that tie into what you were saying earlier about, hey, for a grocery store, you need scale? How does that connect with what you were just describing?
Definitely. Let me describe for those listeners and viewers that don't know the numbers really quickly what Pearl Square is. So again, 9 city blocks. We have 4 multifamily buildings that will total about or just over 1,200 units, 200,000 square feet of retail, which that might be hard for some people to wrap their heads around. The Publix itself is only going to be 35,000 square feet of that. So how big a grocery store is. That's only whatever that math is. It's just a small part of the 200,000 square feet of retail we have. Mentioned the hotel. We're actually going to build a small office building, a boutique office building that will be part of this. And in addition to that, public spaces. We're going to be building parks, a dog park, some regular parks, and then really great public spaces for arts and entertainment. And what's so important about a grocery store, especially in an area that doesn't have it, I would argue that a grocery store in a neighborhood that already has one is not nearly as impactful. But in a neighborhood which would be considered to be a food desert, which is just that it's not near a grocery store. We have been able to quantify that the amount of both tax revenue to the city and the types of rents that you can charge people, is just the demand for people to want to live in a certain area goes up by somewhere between 5 and 15%.
It has to, right?
Yeah.
Because I can hear the other side. Hey, I'd love to live there, but there's no grocery store close
right.
by. It's going to be a barrier maybe to people coming in.
And one more thing on that, it's interesting in today's day and age. I get this question a lot. In today's day and age, where you can pick up your phone and you can scroll to Instacart or another grocery app. Why is it so important? I use Instacart, but I still love going to the grocery store. And if it's sort of last minute because I want to make something on the grill and I want to go see the meat or go look at the produce, I got to tell you, grocery stores are not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, so important to have one there as part of this project for sure. You mentioned last time we were together about a couple of GatewayJax groundbreakings. Where are we at now? Is there more shovels to get into the dirt for the first time, or are we closer to, completion of some of these projects that we've talked about previously?
So we have started construction on 5 projects now, believe it or not. 3 of the 4 apartment buildings are under construction. We just started horizontal development on our 3rd apartment. We started construction on a parking garage that is going to park the hotel eventually, and then one of the apartment buildings. And the latest groundbreaking we just announced last week is for construction on the Lighthouse Garage, which some people may know, which is off of Pearl Street and Union Street, in between Union and Beaver. And we're doing something very unique. I won't say that we're the first to ever do it, but we're actually taking what today is just a full block parking garage, other than the lighthouse structure.
You keeping that?
We are keeping it.
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna do something cool with it. Trust me. We're looking at some ideas right now, but yeah, on the ground floor of Beaver Street, which is really becoming our shopping street now with soft goods and furniture, things that haven't been downtown, by the way, in decades. We're actually going to take out a level of parking. So we're going to sacrifice some parking in that parking garage and inserting double height retail into that space. And the reason why that's so important is because if you think of all the really great shopping districts or opportunities, even looking at something like the St. John's Town Center, which was built all at once and was in a greenfield site, you still have shopping on both sides of the street. You got a store on one side, you got a store on the other side, on the promenade. So it's really important for the pedestrian, who's going to be going from storefront to storefront to feel like they're in a great environment. And so we felt it was worth the extra money. And it turns out there's a lot of demand for the retail that we're building too, to do the retail into the garage. So we're pretty excited about that one.
Help somebody who's not in the business like you are understand this. So you get this vision, and we're going to do retail here. How soon in that process do you need to have the commitments from those retail business owners? Yep, I'm going to rent here. I'm going to build out, all of that kind of stuff.
Well, pretty early on, but for some tenants, we like to think of retail in terms of anchors, or the big retailers like a Publix, sort of the mid-size anchors, so something that might be, a large furniture store or a really big restaurant. Think of a restaurant that you might go to that has 2 floors or is really expansive. I would call that sort of a mini anchor or a small anchor as well. And then we have what we call inline space, which is more of kind of your everyday needs. It might be a grab and go sandwich place. It might be a dry cleaner. It might be a place where you go to get your hair cut. Sort of the services that you need every day. And the inline space, we can pretty much wait until near building delivery to start leasing those spaces. And it's actually important to do that because trends change quite a bit.
Point.
People's needs change quite a bit. I still think you're going to need to go get your hair cut at a physical place, but that's not always the case. So our anchors, we have to get signed up pretty quickly. For the Publix, for example, we wouldn't have moved forward on that project if not for the commitment of Publix. But yeah, on our RN online spaces, we can wait.
Let me ask about this. I know Jacksonville leaders really have praised GatewayJax for the pace and vision, but some residents at times we've heard concerns about increased density or rise of taller buildings downtown, this kind of stuff. How's your team balancing growth with the character and maybe the concerns that you've heard from the community?
You know, we know what ingredients typically work in a development like this, but what we don't know is what we don't know. And so we from the very beginning have been talking to people, not just in our area, in our sort of, you know, right in the core of downtown, but getting into Springfield, even talking to people that live outside of downtown altogether about what they would like to see downtown, what they think is missing, what would draw them to come back to downtown. Heck, what might even draw them to come back downtown and stay the night because it's something so special. And, you know, and we've done some focus groups. And so we're not making these decisions in a vacuum. It's really important that there, you know, you take elements of what you know works, that experience that we talked about, but then you actually tailor it to what's going to work in downtown Jacksonville. And I think, and again, you know, I won't pretend to say that we'll get everything right, but I'd like to think that if we are open and honest with the city and with its residents, and we do what we say we're going to do, which is actually probably the biggest tenet of what we do, is do what you say you're going to do. So long as we do that and we build trust, you know, I don't think that people will be upset with what we're able to do, because we started with listening to people, and then we built, you know, eventually what people wanted. And I think that's what you have to do. That's what really good development is all about.
So as you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit through these interviews in the last couple of years, certainly you lead with confidence. We sense it when we hear you talk about these things. But I saw that you had, at a recent Cup of Jax talk, an audience there, you told them that your team is ahead of the game because of its experience. So what progress that you've seen in these last couple of years gives you confidence that downtown revitalization is, I guess, finally gaining sustainable momentum here in Jacksonville?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a good example. Well, you know, first of all, there are, again, given the experience that I've had in other markets, the amount of public and private investment that has already been occurring downtown. I think I saw something like $2.5 billion of investment, you know, over the last several years has been made in downtown in terms of both private and public investment. And you see things like Riverfront Plaza. I would encourage anyone that hasn't been to Riverfront Plaza to go there and check it out. It's a beautiful park. And I got to tell you, you stand on the event lawn and you just look at the Main Street Bridge and the high rises. I mean, it's majestic. And so, you know, I think
it's beautiful right now, and there's more to come with what they're doing at Riverfront Plaza.
100%. That's just phase one. There's a lot more to come. But yeah, you know, I think there are enough of those sort of moving pieces. You know, the Jaguars' new stadium, it helps to have a really good football team now that coincides with that. The Four Seasons is well on its way to delivering. And then the University of Florida announcing, and I just saw, you know, some of the graduate programs that they're going to be bringing, you know, on day one to downtown. Really great graduate. So all of that's happening. So you just intuitively, I think all the pieces are there. But I will tell you, probably the most tangible thing for me has been what I talked about in terms of the shopping district that we're creating. That didn't happen in Arlington or downtown DC or Tampa on the first phase. Having the types of tenants that we're talking to and hope to announce pretty soon, the furniture stores, the clothing stores, the apparel stores, all of those types of things that maybe today you either get online because they're not in Jacksonville, or you're going down to the St. John's Town Center to shop at. They're typically not what I would call first movers. And after department stores left Jacksonville decades ago, they all like critical mass too, but they all want to be near their friends. they have co-tenancy requirements, is what they call them. But they want to be near, all the different brands that they're typically associated with, and you can't, you can't do that unless you have scale. But also typically they want to see demonstrated demand in a market. Well, these retailers know their customers today probably better than they ever have because of online shopping and the data that they're able to get from their customers. And they have looked at downtown and they've said, we want to be downtown. So that says something, in my opinion, about if some of the most preeminent soft goods, apparel, furniture store retailers want to be downtown because of what the data that they have on their customers that shop with them a lot, I think that says a lot. I'm
trying to be respectful of your time because I got like 20 other questions we could ask. Yeah. But let me kind of wrap up here. I know that the partnerships that GatewayJax has, I'm talking about, I'd seen with JWB Real Estate Capital, DLP Capital. Some people view those as like the key differentiators. What makes collaborations like that different from maybe previous redevelopment attempts that we've seen in Jacksonville? And do you agree? Is that a big factor in the success you're about to have?
Yeah, it is one of the top, if not the top, reasons why we have been able to do what we've been able to do is we have partners, sponsors, and capital partners that believe in this vision, and it's not. I've joked. I may have even said this the first time I was on here. It's not for the faint of heart, right? Because there's not a project immediately right next door that's that has been so successful that you could point to it as a potential investor and say, well, I feel confident in my investment because right next door there was a project that was already successful. Now there are a lot of projects that are nearby that have been successful, but that trust in the vision and now the execution of what we're able to do has been paramount. And I remember the day that I got a call from Alex Safakis, who is the president of JWB, our main sponsor, and it is etched into my mind and will always be. And I just remember thinking, he wants to take this. He wants to do something really special downtown, and he's gonna, we're gonna go places if we do this together. And I came down and I visited Jacksonville. I met some really great people. I saw the bones of downtown. Yeah. We definitely talked about that, the tree canopies and the beautiful historic buildings. And without someone like Alex and the other capital partners and investors that we have, this wouldn't be possible.
Yeah. So really last question now, but from a design and placemaking standpoint, you're really reshaping multiple blocks in downtown. How do you ensure that the transformation really feels authentic to who Jacksonville is and still deliver this modern mixed-use urban environment that you're trying to create?
Yeah, well, speaking of being able to talk about this for hours, that is the secret sauce in all of this, I think, is how do you create a new project that feels authentic and doesn't feel like you just plopped something in from out of the sky. And I'll tell you, I think a couple of things that make that work. Historic building infrastructure. So a lot of the historic buildings that are in and around Pearl Square, for example, we are renovating those and incorporating them into the project. The 110 room hotel, for example, historic building that we're renovating. So that's just one example. Another is to create really great parks and open spaces. Believe it or not, that really helps stitch the fabric together of the existing urban fabric and the new urban fabric. Being able to create these great public spaces, open spaces, and parks really help do that. And then probably the final thing is, I talked a lot about shopping and larger retailers from outside of Jacksonville. We need to have local retailers, mom and pops, that are only unique to Jacksonville. We have to have them as retailers as well in our project. Everything from service providers to, or those that have service style retail, to really great food. I mean, there's great food in Jacksonville, and being able to get some of those local food and beverage retailers downtown. We've been talking to a number of them. I think that will be key.
Well, from that food analogy, yeah, there's a recipe to what makes this successful. And obviously, Bryan Moll, you've got some inspiration to have this vision. And for all of us, it's fun seeing it play out. Thanks so much for taking the time today and talking through all those things. Bryan Moll, CEO of GatewayJax. And appreciate the time now. Appreciate you listening today. Don't forget, new episodes of This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition come out every Thursday morning at 9. We'll talk to you again.